Earlier today, the presentation, we were talking about sort of the general, sort of a general introduction to the TIM and the concepts within the TIM. We talked about the characteristics that give us lenses for looking at different ways that you're integrating technology, give you really ideas about, okay, using a technology tool to collaborate, or using a technology tool to set goals or reflect on learning or get kids more active. And then the levels really talk about a continuum of pedagogical choices that go from a very teacher-centered use to a very student-centered use. Most teachers are more comfortable starting off with technology with a teacher-centered use. They're more comfortable if they're in control of the technology, when it's used, how it's used, and they know, what they're doing at each step with the technology, that it's under their control. So that tends to be why that end of the spectrum is, that's maybe the way in which that descriptor, entry level, is the most apt, is that that's where most teachers are comfortable starting off. So the idea of sort of moving along that continuum, part of it is about raising awareness that there are other possibilities of things that you can do with technology, that there is value in helping scaffold those choices for kids, so that they can start thinking strategically about how technology can support their own learning, and becoming more independent in their use of technology. It also, I think, helps take some of the pressure off of the teacher, so that the teacher doesn't have to feel like they know everything there is to know about the technology that they're using. They can share that with the kids, but it's kind of giving them that permission to say, you know what, I know my subject forwards and back, and I know how kids learn. Those are the important things. If I don't know exactly which button makes this technology work, I'm okay asking a kid for some help with it if I have a student who might have some expertise in that. But also to be comfortable learning the technology, that we're all technology learners, that technology changes very quickly. So, it's okay and it's expected. We're all at a point where we don't know everything about every technology that we use. So the technology integration matrix, while that's, primarily focused on sort of that theory landscape and, what it practically looks like in the classroom, the technology integration matrix evaluation tools give you ways of describing the changes that are happening as you're focusing on technology integration in your professional development. Really, that's the thing, is giving you the tools to tell the story of what's happening, and to make sure that you know where you are, so that you can plan where you want to go with professional development. A couple of the tools that are sort of central to the suite of TIM tools. There's several tools, and they can be used in many different ways. But a couple of the tools that are central to it, the Technology Uses and Perception Survey is a survey instrument that gives you a broad spectrum of data about how your teachers think about the role of technology in the classroom, how frequently they use different tools, how comfortable they are, how well supported they are. And it really gives you a good comprehensive picture that you can use. One way to use it is as pre and post data. So you might have teachers take the TUPS at the beginning of the year, and then again at the end of the year, so that you can gauge the effectiveness of the professional development that you did throughout the course of that year. And in doing that, you might also, with your initial data collection, be able to target professional development to the teachers, so that you're tailoring exactly what the small groups of teachers need, not sort of teachers generally, but teachers specifically. Who is really struggling with a certain piece of software that you use in your school, or who's struggling with a certain piece of hardware, and who can you match them up with, who might be proficient with that software or hardware. So the results of the TUPS really help you target that professional development. And it's kind of fun here at the conference. We've heard from a lot of our current clients, schools and districts, that are using the TUPS in exactly that way. Yesterday, we heard from a team in Puerto Rico that used the TUPS to develop profiles of each teacher to match those teachers with professional development to meet their needs. It was a great example where they really used it to create an individual learning plan for each of the teachers who took the TUPS. The TIMO is a classroom observation tool, and that gives you data about actual implementation. So where the TUPS is a self-reported survey where you're asking people about how frequently they do certain things or what their perceptions are, the TIMO puts you in the classroom or in the classroom environment. It could be online to describe that lesson in terms of the TIM. How is the technology being used in terms of collaboration? How is it being used in terms of student-centered learning? So that you can get a good description. And one of the real powers of that is to provide a basis for having great conversations around technology integration. So you're going to have, when you have a lesson that's described in terms of the TIM, the conversations that grow out of that are about constructive learning or active learning or collaboration or student-centered learning. It's about gradual release of responsibility, about agency and student interest, differentiating based on student needs. So the conversations that you have end up not being about the software or the hardware. The conversations that you're having are about the pedagogical dimensions of technology use, which are the ones that make the difference, basically. That's one of the sort of underlying, one of the conclusions that you can draw from the research that underlies the TIM is that the technology itself is not the thing that makes the difference in the learning, it's the pedagogy. It's the choices that a teacher makes about how to strategically use the technology. That's what makes the difference. And the TIM, the TIMO, the TUPS, all of these things help reveal that. I'll tell you another thing is a lot of times with technology integration, you'll have a purchase that you make with technology. So it's maybe hardware, or it's maybe software, or it's maybe other efforts, and there's an expense tied to that, and you need to justify that expense. And if you are trying to decide, okay, we bought a bunch of tablets, was it worth the purchase of the tablets? You need to be able to describe what changes took place because of that, and you're not necessarily going to see those changes in student grades. And so it's important that you have other ways to collect data and understand what happens on whatever technology journey you're on in your school, to figure out, how do you describe the changes that have occurred based on the professional development that you're doing, based on the resources that you're providing. And the TIMO and the TUPS and other tools within the TIM tool suite help do that. The third column here, the Action Research for Technology Integration tool, it gives you a way to collect data from across the school about teacher-directed inquiry. So that's kind of a very specific area. And honestly, that tool is one of the lesser used tools in the suite because not everybody does teacher inquiry. But there are some interesting uses for that. So I'll just sort of mention that and then set that aside. This is sort of the login for that, but I'm actually going to jump ahead in this presentation and talk about the TIM-C, because I think in addition to the TIMO, so the TIMO is that classroom observation tool. We have a version of the TIMO that's meant for lesson plan review, and we have a version of the TIMO that's meant for reflections. So the TIM-R is for teacher reflections on their own practice, and the TIM-LP to enable you to review lesson plans. But I want to skip ahead. I'll just give you a quick view here. that when you're using the TIMO, you have a very visual tool where you are clicking directly in the cells to choose the levels that you're seeing in that lesson. You can also, for any of the indicators, drill down and get detailed descriptors for what the student is doing, what the teacher is doing, how the environment is arranged. And those descriptors, those detailed descriptors, help you figure out, so that's sort of what that observation tool is doing for you, is really helping you get it into that usable format. You can also, from within the observation tool, provide feedback to teachers based on their practice. And within the observation tool, you can send these observations directly to the teacher, or you can create reports for teachers and others to view and reflect on. But I wanted to mention in particular, this is some of the data that comes out of the tool. We have reports that you can generate within the software on the site. We also have reports that you can download in Excel format, where it breaks down all of the observations, all of the levels that you've seen, different things like that. The TUPS has lots of interesting data analysis that comes out of that as well. I'll tell you one thing, we ask a series of questions about technologies within the TUPS. One of the things we do within the TUPS, we ask a series of questions about what is your skill level with this technology, and how useful do you think this is in your teaching area. And by combining those two pieces of information, we can create an interpretation of that where we're sort of graphing that information and figure out where different technologies are for different teachers sort of geographically on this layout. Things that are near each other, like you have some sort of different zones that we talk about, quadrants of this graph, so that if something is in quadrant 1, it means that it's high in perceived usefulness for that teacher, but that teacher says they are low skill. So that's something where that teacher is ready for professional development on that technology, because they think it's important, but they don't know how to use it at all, which is very different from high skill, low usefulness, that quadrant 4, where the teacher says, I know how to use this technology, but this is not an important technology in my classroom. And so using data like this, you could look at that and say, well, okay, maybe they're right. Maybe that's not a useful technology for them in the classroom. That's fine. You can leave it alone. But if you believe that it is a useful technology, they just don't see the value in it, then the professional development approach you would want to take with that teacher is more about making the case for why this is an effective teaching tool. If you start a PD with that teacher that is showing them where the on button is and what the menus say, that's not necessarily what that teacher, it's going to turn that teacher off. Like, they're not interested in that. They believe they already know that. What they need is really concrete teaching examples of how it makes an impact with students. And so this is an example of the kind of data that you can get out, and how that data might be, sort of immediately actionable. And you can, based on your TUPS results, you can immediately group teachers based on these kinds of data points. One way of thinking about it, one of the districts that we work with, they think of it, if you're raising somebody's skill level with a technology, that they refer to as training. If you're raising somebody's understanding of how to use it professionally in their work, that they think of as professional development, and they make that distinction in the things that they offer to their teachers. The reporting, there's lots of charts and graphs that you can produce, of course, that are based on that. But I wanted to skip ahead to the TIMC to give you a view of that. That's our coaching and mentoring tool that's built into the tools now. And the TIMC, it supports those coaching conversations. It's not a coaching model. So if you already have a coaching model of any kind that you're working with, whether it's about technology or just about teaching, you can use the TIMC to record those conversations. really within the TIMC, you are in phases, setting goals, planning activities, monitoring the progress of those activities, recording the outcomes of those goals, and then reflecting on the entire coaching cycle. And the TIMC gives you a way to sort of put all of that in a tool where you can monitor your progress across the school. You might have lots of different people running those coaching cycles, and you can track how you're doing with coaching through the TIMC. So those are some, just sort of a general introduction to some of the tools, some of the main tools. There are other tools that we haven't really gone into detail on, and there are lots of other details that we could talk about. But I'll stop there and ask, do we have any questions? One of the things we didn't talk about is the administration section. All of the sections of the TIM tools, there's a lot of customization that's possible. You can customize items in the survey, for instance. You can also download all of your data, run reports within the software, or download raw data to report in other systems. So it can really be a powerful source of data to support professional development in the space.